Hello, everyone. Right now we have with us Pooja, um, part of the Voice of the Young series. Let's listen to her. Over to you, Pooja.
Thank you, sir. Firstly, thank you so much for having me in this session. And my name is Pooja. I am currently finishing my master's in sustainability and built environment, which is an extension of my previously done diploma in the same stream. I'm an architect by background, and I very briefly practiced as an architect post my graduation from SPA Delhi. So, like about the work that I'm doing right now, I am more into policy development, and I work at the intersection of environment and development now. I no longer work in the construction industry, but through this course, which I am currently doing, I'm trying to look at housing in particular, and I'm trying to see how to build climate resilient, affordable housing. So this is the work that I'm doing right now. And I'm also trying to understand urban governance, how things are executed at the city level. So this is something which I got into through my work experience. When I started working with development alternatives in 2021, at that time, there were a couple of projects that the team was doing in rural areas, for example, or in hilly areas, where they were trying to generate opportunities, job opportunities, or livelihood uh, through models where people would construct their houses and generate livelihood for themselves. So that was like an interesting project. This was something that I got introduced to at Development Alternatives. Then I moved to World Resources Institute. I worked there for around 1.5 years on a project called Zero Carbon Building Accelerator. Alongside, I also worked on other projects which were aligned to my background, like sustainable cooling and urban energy transition. So, um, so yeah, that has been my journey so far. I also like my most recent work was with the Alliance for Energy Efficient Economy, where also I was looking at decarbonization policies for the building sector and a couple of more projects that the team was doing at that time. So this is the work that I've been doing so far.
Okay, it's very interesting work. Could you tell us a bit more about resilient, affordable housing?
Yeah, sure, sir. So one is that housing, I think housing is a service, and housing um, just does not mean a product or a unit which is constructed, but also services like sanitation, like electricity, and uh, and I think primarily with the affordable housing, in the affordable housing segment, this has been a challenge because most of the housing which is constructed for slum rehabilitation, or which is constructed under the umbrella of so-called affordable housing for the lower income groups, is located in areas which are not very well connected for jobs, or which lack certain kind of services. So when we say climate resilient affordable housing, we want to construct, or we want to build housing which is one very which works as a service, which where people are able to access all kind of services well, including climate resilience, because we also want them to get enough um, enough, I would say, safety from things like heat stress, for example, or disaster preparedness. So I got actually I started with this climate resilient housing bit during my fellowship. We were, when I was at Anand Fellowship in 2021, which is the pandemic year, 2021, we were looking at informal settlements and we were trying to see if we could retrofit those houses. Not build new houses, but just retrofit the roofs. One is that white paint that everybody generally talks about, but we were trying to look at a material called mod roof. So it is a recyclable tile, and we got to know about it through some of the people who have been working in the informal settlements, like Mahila Housing Trust and others. So, so that was the time that I actually started thinking about climate resilience in the in for this particular group. And I think one of the challenges is that there have not been any successful business models. I think this is my interpretation of the project that we did. Um, that although some of the materials were tested, some of the technologies were tried and tested and approved, like people, the communities, for example, they like those um, technology and they were very keen to adopt them because they also had an aspiration to have more aesthetic or more durable solutions, uh, but financing those solutions is, I think, a challenge. And so that's when I started thinking about it, that how could through different schemes, like we have India Cooling Action Plan at the national level in India, which talks in depth about several sectors, including space cooling in buildings. So I that's when I started thinking about if there were any budgetary allocations, if a nodal agency was defined, say the Disaster Management Authority, or somebody would execute this really. So that's how I started with this bit in the housing space. And I think since then, there have been some progress in the country. Telangana had a cool roof. Telangana now has a cool roof policy. Other states are also progressing. I think Kerala, Assam, even I think Uttar Pradesh. So some states are actively working on this because heat is a growing concern. I also recently got to know that the latest Finance Commission report, I think they've added heat as a disaster, and they are trying to allocate some budget to this particular disaster. So that's how I've been looking at several policies. Who are the nodal agencies? What is the possibility to get funding or finance for these kind of interventions?
Well, okay, it's a very interesting area that, of course, you're only looking at housing, but you know this better than me, that the commercial buildings, they are also huge users of energy for cooling. So if we are going
Right.
to do the energy efficiency, then the future commercial buildings must also be resilient and efficient. So how do you see that?
Oh, I completely agree with you, sir. I feel that you're absolutely right. Commercial buildings also, all kind of buildings, whether it's the hospitals or commercial banks, every kind of building does require cooling. Um, for commercial buildings, I feel that commercial buildings had better, um, I would say, uh, in the regulatory environment. If I look, I mean, there's been a code, ECBC code, Energy Conservation Building Code, and I think commercial buildings to some extent were able to adopt some of these practices. And I won't say that they are very efficient, because I know that some of the buildings are completely glass structures, but
Yeah,
they end up getting certified. So
uh,
I would not comment on that how certifications are happening, or what are the loopholes there, because there certainly are. But I think commercial buildings, there were certain incentives for these people to bring in this aspect of cooling to make lives comfortable. I feel that residential, also certain income groups do have access to cooling. Uh, but I feel it's just those lower income groups or maybe the slum residents where things are things are like terrible, I would say, if I could use that word. I think that is a segment that has not received any attention. There is a code, definitely, Econivas Samhita, which is being it's still being adopted, and we don't know how would that be implemented. But that residential within residential, there is a very large group of people who work from their house, like women, for example, who've been working from home since forever. I think the pandemic was a time that people realized this, that there are certain people have always been working at their home informally. So definitely, I feel that if I mean, you're absolutely right. Commercial buildings and all kind of buildings do require cooling. I This may be my bias towards residential sector, but residential sector, I feel that it also is growing rapidly. Like some of the statistics, if we see, it's the residential sector which is projected to grow a lot, and it's because of urbanization, because uh, of other factors.
Okay, so how do you make it? I mean, efficiency is what you have told us about right now. What about resilient? What do we do for resilience? Or is this integrated?
So I look at it. I feel that they are integrated in some ways, and so one is, I think, mitigation and adaptation. I think mitigation, like reduction of, say, emissions, um, or mitigation. I feel that mitigation strategies do receive some more attention, and adaptation, on the other hand, does not. And I think it's a combination of both mitigation and adaptation that actually brings resilience. When I'm talking about resilience, I'm actually, so this is a thing that I've realized over time, that we end up glorifying resilience a lot, that we feel that people should adapt to, the stress, heat stress, or any kind of calamity. And I feel that it is not the right way um, to approach a disaster or a climate or climate action. So I feel that when I say resilience, I am concerned about efficiency, for sure, but I'm more concerned about the health of the uh, dwellers. Like I feel that, and that's why when this debate about whether we should use air conditioners or we should, go back to living the way we were living in the past. Well, I think that's a uh, very complicated debate. It is always um, discussed. Uh, And I feel that air conditioners, in some parts or in some situations become a necessity when things are very humid, when it crosses a certain wet your wet bulb temperature is like very high, and where you do not have an option but to have go for an air conditioner. So I think that how I look at resilience and efficiency, I look at it together. I feel that there are trade-offs to all kind of technology interventions, and therefore we should be smart, and have to um, we have to mitigate, of course, and we also have to make sure that the beneficiaries or the people or the dwellers, they are able to get a conducive environment to live.
Okay, there was a report recently in an American newspaper about a big city being built, not big city, small city being built in Maharashtra by the Lodha group. And they said that they are building it in such a way that the use of natural cooling is there, and that you use air conditioners very rarely. And of course, there's a lot of elements of, habitat, walk to work, this, that, and all. But are you aware of it, or is it just big news here and not big news in India?
I don't know. I may have um, seen it somewhere, but I don't remember reading it
Okay,
recently.
fine. All right. No, I
Yeah,
understand. Okay, I'm just asking, that uh,
yeah,
this is a very complicated, housing is very complicated because you have to look after
yeah,
so
for
many
sure.
aspects of it. Okay, so uh, that's why asked the question about industrial and commercial, because it's not so complicated. But what you're saying is that can be done because the codes are there and people are experts, and housing is an issue because it is so complicated, right?
Yeah, housing. So I feel that housing also becomes complicated because it's mostly self-constructed. I
Yeah.
mean, although whatever we see, whether it's Lodha or it's like the other DLF and other big players, I feel that, of course, they are building a lot of houses, but people are building their own houses. Like 70% of the construction, if we look at under Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, it's self-constructed, and therefore, I feel. I feel therefore making any intervention in housing space is more difficult because there are there are many challenges I feel that which do not exist specifically in the commercial or the industrial sector.
Okay, you're an architect. Okay, so has green architecture really gone into the mainstream in housing?
Green architecture, that's that's a very I think good question. I feel that it has gone in the opposite direction. I mean, I feel the way things were constructed, the way traditional practices in India were, where people used to build around a courtyard, and uh, you know of course there were different opportunities or challenges at that time. But I think those construction practices, mud walls or thick walls, which provided better insulation, we don't see them any longer. So I feel that my opinion is that we were living in a better, greener. We there were Our practices were much greener earlier, and now it is cosmetics. So there is an attempt to show that it is green. However, I feel that as an architect, I feel that most of the times it's cosmetics because because I think it has happened because of cultural influence. I think people got interested in certain materials, or certain materials became symbolic of social class. So you see more of glass and big windows, and of course they have their own advantage. They give you good interior and exterior permeability, and of course
Yeah.
there's daylight, and there are many advantages to that also, and I don't deny those. um, but I feel that there is a there is more of green in on papers. Like we call some structures get certified, and it is very hard to believe for me when I see those structures that okay, this particular building has got some certification, because those buildings are probably following rainwater harvesting, or maybe they are following some principles and not all principles. And also when we do when we go by a very mathematical approach, where we just look at consume energy consumption and energy production is equal, and therefore the so-called net zero, which suddenly it becomes net zero on paper, and it gets certified, but it may not necessarily be the best way to approach. That's how I look at it.
Okay, let me just, I'm only an amateur. Let me just explore it a bit with you. I mean, in the past, you couldn't get raw materials from a distance. Anyway, cement was not available. There was no cement, so you had to do with local materials, right? And there was no electricity or air conditioning, so you had to find natural ways to cool. So obviously, you can say it was green because there was no energy used. So you had to use the local expertise, the local materials. to find some degree of cooling. You couldn't get the complete effect, but you could get some degree of cooling. This I understand. I grew up in Jaipur, and Hawa Mahal is famous.
Yeah.
And Hawa Mahal is supposed to, have given women who were not wandering outside that much cooling, right? Because the whole point was that it's called Hawa Mahal because the air flows. And if the air flows,
Yeah.
the stuffiness is. So that was primarily a green, because you were looking to get, at least for the well-off, the Ranis, some cooling. The only choice was to use nature, right? So
Yeah.
in that sense, it was green. But how can we modernize and yet be green? That's the question, not whether we can go back to the old. I don't go that much, but when you go to India, you see in the new big buildings, there's nothing Indian about them. This is my complaint. There's
Yeah.
nothing Indian about this. What,
Yeah.
so what do you say to that?
I think that's a great observation and good question. I feel so. One is that some of the practices which we followed earlier, like the jali, for example,
Yes.
it's a great way to build air pressure, and it's a good passive strategy.
Yeah.
Um, I feel that some of these can be followed, and I think they are followed in some of the educational institutions, or some of the buildings I've seen that people really do good work with jalis. And to the question that how can we modernize while still following, some of the practices, I think that is very important. And some of the challenges exist because the climate was also different. In the past, there was, I think, like right now, the one big challenge that I see is humidity, other than heat and humidity, like the combination of both. So I feel that in the past, because weather patterns or climate patterns were different, so those practices worked well. And now we need some additional bit of active cooling, some additional things to work. Otherwise, it becomes challenging in this climate. So I do think that we should be combining some of the things. We have to modernize for sure. At the same time, to the question that everything looks similar, and things have lost, or construction, building and construction has lost its identity. I would say that there was an identity. You go to a city and you would be able to identify the city through its architecture, which no longer exists. Gurgaon, Bangalore, Hyderabad, everything is similar. So I think that is something that I do not appreciate. I feel that it's good to have some ornamentation. I know that there are people who argue that there are people who have their set of arguments against ornamentation, and they are minimalist. They advocate for that. But I feel retaining some identity is good. And there is also there is a whole branch, or neuroaesthetics, where people have many times people have um, discussed this, that when you keep some ornamentation, it is also beneficial for your psychological health, because uh, it becomes very mundane, it becomes very monotonous to see so many high rise and so much of glass, all four facades. So I think that is a practice that we should do away with. And it has happened because of the global influence. This is my interpretation. I mean, I feel that it all happened because um, people wanted to build and mark their social class, or also probably convenience. So I think are both are the reasons why this has gone in this manner, building monotonous.
Full. All right. Uh, any tips you have for young people? Because you've gone through career changes, jobs, this,
Yeah.
that. So, any tips for young people who are in 11th or 12th or first year, something like that? What tips do you have?
So one is, I would say that I think when I was in 11th and 12th, I heard a lot from people that you should do UPSC, you do, policy and development. But at that time, I was overwhelmed. I got overwhelmed with the, politically charged debates around me. And that's why I chose this profession. I studied architecture. But then there was a reroute. Then I again went back to policy because I realized that if you want to do something substantial, uh, it's the policy sector, which is very slow, of course, but it can make your life meaningful. So somebody who is right now in 11th and 12th, I would say that they should think through properly. They should not, if they have a bent of mind towards policy and they are just hesitating to,
Mm.
um, you know, do social sciences or be in the or give it a shot to UPSC, which I never appeared in. So
Mm.
I think that for them, I would say that don't get overwhelmed and do not also stick to one thing for too long. I have friends who prepared for UPSC for a very long time and then they struggled mentally. So I think for 11th and 12th, I would say that they should be open. People should be open minded. And I feel at that age when we are 18, we don't realize that life is too long. Like now, I feel that life is too long. When I was 18, I used to think that in 10 years, I'll achieve so much. And at 28, I realized, oh my God, it's like I feel that now I feel like 30, 40, 50. I feel that there's a long time ahead of us and we should not be scared to take some decisions, and whenever if things don't work out, you can always uh, choose a different track. So
All
I
right.
would just say that don't be scared.
All right. And what about your own future? Where is it headed? I'm not asking
My own future.
not specific, but generally.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think so. I have many times I've thought that I could start my own urban practice in this city. I worked for a while in my city to just understand how things work at the city level, and also to get an idea if for me doing something in this small city is possible. So my future is actually I'm still heading in that direction. I think I'm going to work with some city governments in the near future. That is how I see myself working, to work with the city governments, and probably 5 years or 10 years later, I could think of starting my own practice.
Okay.
But so right now, in the immediate future, I'm going to continue to work with the governments, with the city governments.
Okay. Wonderful. All right. Any final word from you?
Final words. No, I'm just very thankful that you dropped me this message and you gave me this chance to do the session with you. And so thank you for that. I've read some of your work and I'll read more of it. So I've seen that you write extensively on policy and economics and development. So thank you
Okay,
so
let's
much.
talk about that offline. Let's end it here today. I'll be back with another
So
young person or an expert soon. Till then, bye everybody.